Hello, scaredy cats, it's me, Scaredy Matt in a hat. Probably wondering about the hat. It's because I made a mistake cutting my hair, and then I had to shave my head. Don't like the way it looks, don't want to edit the video looking at it, so I put on a hat. That's the story, that's all that happened. Many moons ago, I made a list of 5 beginner horror movies, and that was a fun thing to do, where I had fun on the internet. So I thought I'd do that video again. This is that video, but twice. Another one. Just 5 movies you can watch to get you started in horror movies with as much variety as I can muster, except most of them are supernatural movies about ghosts and ghouls. This time I'm trying to focus less on the classics, more on diversity. A major criticism many people had on the first video was that all of my recommendations were American, even though I put 28 Days Later on the list, which is British. But let's be real here, the British are just Americans with cooler accents. Anybody that's taken over most of the world is pretty much American. Anyway, I've added a couple of foreign films this time around, but it's still mostly American movies because most of the movies I watch are American, and probably you too, so don't judge me, you're not better than me. Let's just go ahead and get this one out of the way, huh? I left it off the previous list because we were already getting a little slasher heavy. And plus, it's kind of obvious, right? Like, everybody knows you gotta watch Nightmare on Elm Street. It's easily my favorite series of movies because they're just good old-fashioned fun. Always inventive, always interesting, and with plenty of 80s cheese. A Nightmare on Elm Street, in case you're an alien from the planet Nerdulon who doesn't know, follows a group of teens as they're picked off by a mysterious serial killer named Freddy Krueger, with the power to control their dreams. Also, if you die in the dream, you die in real life, is the other thing. Be warned though, the original is probably not the movie you think it is. While the rest of the movies in this franchise have a lighter tone, New Nightmare notwithstanding, the first movie features a far more menacing and predatory Freddy. It also features some truly terrible special effects that might break your suspension of disbelief a little bit. But it explores its terrifying premise to its logical conclusion. There's a genuine sense of helplessness and futility throughout this movie. You know the characters have to sleep at some point, and when they do, Freddy's gonna be there, waiting. Nancy, the main character, is left to fend for herself as one by one, the people she depends on are either killed or proven to be unreliable. But if you want that wisecracking goofy Freddy, and who could blame you, watch Nightmare Part 3, the best of all of them, in my opinion. That one's much lighter in tone, more of a horror-themed adventure movie than anything. Plus, it has that sweet Dawkins song over the credits. Before his breakout film Blade 2, before his breakout hit Hellboy 2: The Golden Army, Guillermo del Toro directed this little movie about a young boy going to live in a haunted orphanage after his parents are killed in the Spanish Civil War. This is the rare ghost story that treats ghosts less as a threat and more as a manifestation of trauma. The world is a cruel place, especially at war, and that cruelty leaves deep scars in the psyche of the living and the dead alike. The real horror here isn't the apparitions of ghostly children, but the real-life brutality of warfare and what the survivors have to carry with them. This one's kind of a bummer. You will be bummed out by this movie, more so maybe even than scared, so keep that in mind. But it has a cool ghost. Some cool ghosts in that one. Now It Follows is a movie about a sexually transmitted demon. Now that might sound like an incredibly arch premise, something out of a bawdy comedy or parody or whatever. You might be surprised to learn that this is one of the scariest movies of the past few years. It Follows is all about the execution of its admittedly strange premise. It creates this constant feeling of being pursued by a danger that can come out of nowhere and absolutely will not stop. Its haunting and ethereal atmosphere created by the movie's anachronistic setting and deliberately stilted dialogue make everything feel kind of muddled and dreamlike. Its truly outstanding soundtrack makes the simple act of someone walking toward you a gripping and intense portent of death. This is a movie that's easy to overthink, and I don't mean the subtext, which is ripe for analysis, but rather the mechanics of the movie's lore.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
Love the moral code that doesn't count a surprise drugging and kidnapping situation as hurting someone.
It's very slow, but it's not dumb.
If it's not dumb, why is it taking the form of a very obvious lady? In fact, why is it taking the form of a human being at all? Wouldn't it be more effective to be a wolf that could chase people down and rip out their throats?
Almost like that's deliberate fucking subtext!
It doesn't make sense on a literal level, it makes sense on an emotional level. And that somehow makes it way scarier. Word of warning though, hoo boy, does this movie shit the bed in the third act. Like, oh my god, what a nosedive in quality. Shitty endings are just kind of a hazard of doing business in horror movies. A lot of them just end abruptly or introduce some kind of last minute plot device to wrap things up and leave things ambiguous enough for a sequel. But you really notice it a lot more in a movie like this that does a good job in setting the tone in the beginning. That being said, still more than worth your time, and if you do nothing else today, at least listen to the soundtrack. What, you haven't seen Get Out? Really? You need me, a literal jar of mayonnaise, to recommend this movie to you? You already know you have to see it. It's one of the freshest, sharpest, and most entertaining horror movies in decades. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you gotta watch it, you already know. In fact, I'm changing the recommendation. Now it's Hellraiser. Hellraiser is a movie about an evil cube that makes you into a bondage demon from space. It's gruesomely violent, nihilistic, and revels in the pain of its main characters. Maybe you've heard the term torture porn that would be coined decades later for movies like Hostel and Saw. But Hellraiser deserves that title a little bit more because it explores the link between sexuality, hedonism, and pain, the limits of human experience, positive and negative. Hell, in the world of Hellraiser, isn't a punishment, it's something people seek out. Something that people work to achieve in a quasi-sexual obsessive mania. An eldritch plane where gruesome beings called Cenobites torture you not because they hate you, but as a gift. They have such sights to show you. Now this movie is obviously not going to be for everybody, and it's not as sex negative as that description may make it sound. It's more life negative, experience negative. But it's got cool monsters. Look at this guy. He's the Chatterer because of his teeth. Also, for this one, maybe skip the sequels. Part 2 is great. Part 3 is good bad. Part 4 is okay, and then fuck, they just kept making them. They just kept making more of them, and they were never good again. Don't bother. But what if you don't want a movie where you have to think about anything? You just want a surreal nightmarescape of pretty colors, hairy arms, and rad synth music. Suspiria is the story of a girl being inducted into a prestigious dance school in Germany, only to discover it may be run by witches with sinister purpose. But it's also only barely about that, because it's best to think of Suspiria as less of a story being told, more a series of beautiful and creepy vignettes. Logic is just fully out the window on this one. Yeah, why wouldn't there be a big pit full of loose razor wire in a dance academy? Sure, witches turn invisible when they sleep, but they still snore really loud so you can find them. Sometimes it's gonna rain maggots a little bit. Why not? Perhaps the most approachable of famed Italian horror auteur Dario Argento's body of work, Suspiria is a feast for the senses. Beautifully shot, phantasmagorically colorful like tripping on LSD inside of Castlevania, and featuring a dope-as-hell soundtrack by Goblin. Suspiria is mindless in a calculated way. That's not to say it's dumb, it's not. It's just not of the mind. It doesn't appeal to your thinking brain, but rather to the very center of your lizard brain, where threats are sudden, inscrutable, and alien. Bonus movie, it also has a great remake from 2018, which is kind of the opposite of all those things I said in a lot of ways. A movie that is deeply cerebral and almost demands a close eye and deep read. Both come highly recommended, but both are highly polarizing, so your experience may vary. And that's my list of 5 movies you can watch. High concept stuff I'm doing here today. I don't know what you want from me. You want 6 movies? Okay, let the right one in. Put that on there. 7? Shin Godzilla. Why not watch Shin Godzilla? That's relevant to the pandemic right now. It's worth revisiting. You want 8 movies? Too bad. There are no more movies. There's no movies left. We have to wait for them to make new movies because I've talked about all of the movies that exist. Hey, thanks for watching another Scaredy Cats video here on YouTube.com. Did you know that I put up these videos every 12 p.m. on Tuesdays Eastern Standard Time? Well, I'd like to see more of these videos, Matt, you're saying to yourself out loud right now. And I can hear you say it. And I have a solution for you. Subscribe to me. And then ring that spooky little bell. And then you'll always know when the videos come.